Awesome. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Red Hat channel. I'm your host, Cedric Clyburn. I'm going to be helping navigate this series where we're going to be talking about open source technologies. And because this is Demo Deep Dive, we're going to be showing you how they work in practice. And I'm joined by my lovely guest, Evan Shortiss. Thank you so much for being here with us, Evan. Evan is a developer advocate at Red Hat, much like me, but he's going to be focusing on a very real problem, which is how do we ensure that our AI models are also keeping track with the software projects that we're typically expected to deliver with the software development lifecycle, that have governance, that have ops around them. So, Evan, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, good to be here. Happy to chat and walk through some demo.
Yeah, man, thanks so much for being here. So, if you haven't been on our demo deep dive show before, well, please feel free to scan the QR code up here, which is going to lead you to interact.redhat.com, which is a series of different hands-on demos that cover topics from Linux to Kubernetes, virtualization, automation with Ansible, and much, much more. All of these open source projects that are powering real applications that we use every day. So feel free to scan that, test them out on your own. And the experience that we're going to be working with today specifically revolves around, Evan, what you do in your day to day. And feel free to give us a little bit more information about what we're going to be taking a look at.
Yeah, so I typically work with a product at Red Hat known as Red Hat Developer Hub that is based on an upstream CNCF project called Backstage. So it's a tool for building internal developer frameworks, internal developer portals. Sometimes people refer to it as a framework for building portals. It was first popularized by Spotify, I think about 5-6 years ago, and since then it's become the leading open source project for doing so. And in typical Red Hat fashion, we take that, right? We package it for enterprise customers, security patches, easier to run on OpenShift, and also we've added a few other features too, which I can talk about if we have time. But the one feature we'll talk about today, I think, will be the integration between Red Hat Developer Hub and our OpenShift AI platform. That's kind of the key message of the demo today. Of course, with Developer Hub, there's a lot of possibilities available and plugins and features and so on. But yeah, today, an AI spin is what we're going to focus on.
Nice. I think this is really important because what I see in the open source world of AI is that you've got models like Llama and Quinn and DeepSeek and all the other frontier model labs that release their models on Hugging Face. And you've got AI engineers who really want to use these models, see what they can do in these business applications. But then you have the other side of the platform engineers and the operations and the security and governance teams who are like, wait. How do we take these kind of artifacts that we, just kind of download from the internet and actually integrate them into software lifecycle, right? Because we can't forget about all of these other components that we need. And so you've got the AI component, then you've also got this platform component. So I'm really excited to see how you bridge these two worlds, because I know this is a lot of challenge for a lot of teams who want to use these cutting edge models, but need to have those secure processes in place to move them from testing to actually out in the real world. So I'm excited to see what you got.
All right, I can dive right in then, I guess. Yeah, and you kind of hit the nail on the head there. This demo kind of follows that exact flow. And there's two personas in this demo. I should start by saying there's the persona of the platform engineer, or maybe even the data scientist or AI engineer, like you mentioned. And then we kind of switch over to the persona of a developer. So we're looking at things from both perspectives here. And I'll make sure that's evident as we go through the demo. But yeah, let me dive right in. There are like 3 slides at the beginning of this interactive demo where we kind of talk about some background. So you talked about one of these already, Cedric, which is the one on the right? The control, like concerns with using models that are from upstream or published on Hugging Face. So we're kind of zeroing in on that in this demo as well as complexity and cost, right? So the cost of actually running these frontier models and the complexity of tuning models and actually deploying them on your own infra, perhaps with the whole sovereign cloud movement. But I think control, we can talk about that more today. And additionally, the other thing we talk about in this arcade and this space in general is lots of larger enterprises. Their AI initiatives sometimes take a long time to get into production. So the idea of the demo today is to show kind of a strategy or a means to getting from POC to production, right? So you're taking these models, you're hosting them, and actually getting them in the hands of your teams, but in a structured manner. Again, you're not just pulling random models from Hugging Face and running them. You're using approved models, is what we're going to see today.
Awesome.
And then finally, just quickly zeroing in on a few other things, particularly on the right-hand side here. Like, we're going to talk about Gen AI today, but also developer productivity is a big issue too. And that's where DevHub comes in. It makes it easier for developers to be productive, particularly in large enterprise environments where you've got probably thousands of different services running. You've got a myriad of teams, and it's hard to kind of keep all that information in your head. So Developer Hub helps with that. And then also, I won't touch on this so much, but supply chain security is something we often talk about in this space as well, particularly when it comes to building out applications using Developer Hub.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so with that out of the way, this is where we get into the meat of it, I guess, the real demo. And right now, we're kind of playing the role of a data scientist or an AI engineer or even a platform engineer type person. And what's on screen now is OpenShift AI. And I think, Cedric, you're familiar with this, so please do interrupt me if I'm not doing it justice, or if you want to actually point anything out, by all means, jump in. But we're here in OpenShift AI, and you can see we've selected the model catalog on the left. And with OpenShift AI, AI engineers can use this to actually get started working with AI and ML models. So yeah, the model catalog has a list of available models for AI engineers in your organization. Here we have some approved models. They're just the defaults we would typically have in this environment. So we can see, for example, we have Granite models in here, and they're smaller, right? They're the 8B parameter models, but we're just going to use one of those in this demo. And when we click on a model, we get information about it, right? So it's documentation, and even its model location, right? So these are stored as container images in an OCI compliant registry. You can see it over there on the right-hand side, the registry link for the model. And what you can do is register models in a model registry. So we have this concept of a model registry where you can take models from a catalog and actually register them and make them available for use. So for example, if we click on register model here, we can fill in a couple of parameters if we like, such as the version number, the format, and description. And once you're happy with that, you can go ahead and register the model, and then it's available to be used from your model registry. So if we click on a model in the registry, again, you get all that metadata. So the information we entered just a moment ago is listed here, the license, the source model itself, and the URL to access it.
This is very cool. So kind of like how we are building and pushing our images to like Docker Hub or Key.io or something like that. This is like the same thing for models?
Pretty much, yeah, exactly. So models are made available in a registry for people to consume. Precisely, yeah.
Great idea.
And it's not bad, right? It's like just familiar, like what developers are used to or what engineers are used to, hopefully. Although I'm sure some developers would rather just work on their laptop. But in a large organization, I think this is necessary, right?
Mm-hmm.
So where we go from here, right, is we want to actually use these models, right? A model that's just floating in registry is not any good. The same as an application image floating in registry is not actually doing anything. So what we're going to do is we're going to take one of these models. You see we have two in the registry right now. And this is where the link to Developer Hub is going to come in. And you're going to see this in a second. But basically, Red Hat has developed a bridge, we call it, I guess, or a synchronization between OpenShift AI and Developer Hub. Because the people or the personas or the users that will be in OpenShift AI have a very specific goal, right? They're managing models, they're fine-tuning, they're doing data science pipelines, and so on. Whereas the people in Developer Hub are more general app developers, probably, or often they're more general app developers. So since we registered this model, we can head over to Developer Hub and see its homepage. So this is what Developer Hub looks like if it's unskinned. The thing about Developer Hub is you can fully skin it. It's customizable because it's your internal developer portal. So you may want to align it with your brand standards. But for this demo, of course, we're using the default Red Hat branded skin. But what you'll see here is that it has a UI that gives developers everything they need to get started building applications in your application environment, which is hopefully OpenShift. But it does work with standard AWS primitives or GKE or Azure as well. But today we're going to see deploying applications on OpenShift. So developers can use the dropdown in the top right to find links to all sorts of dev tools like Podman Desktop, the OpenShift AI dashboard if they really need to, Instruct Lab and Key.io and Slack and so on. So you can link to all of your internal tools directly from DevHub, which is super nice. So they just come to one place and they find what they need as a developer. Now, where this gets interesting and where we're focused today is on that AI integration. So you see here on the homepage, we have AI models listed. So those models are actually being sourced from OpenShift AI. So if you were paying attention a moment ago, you would have seen that in OpenShift AI, we had the 8B model, the code-based one, and we also had Granite 3.1 in there too. So these models have been synchronized over here. And by synchronized, what we really mean is just their metadata, right? They're still managed by OpenShift AI, and they're still in a registry. But this is more of a discovery portal for your developers who may need to use models in their applications.
I like that you say discovery because, I mean, you just showed in the I don't know if people call it hamburger menu or, the menu on the right that you have. You had, Podman Desktop for container development. You had OpenShift AI for AI model lifecycle, right? That we just added the model to. You had, Argo CD for GitOps, so ensuring the cluster state is up to date to our repository. You had, OpenShift for container orchestration. I think this is really cool because typically, even if I wasn't a developer, I might need to, flip around to all of these different platforms that are all required, to be honest, in order to run this application, right? It's just the reality of how our world works today is we need all of those assurances. And so I think it's cool that, hey, I have these models easily accessible here in one platform, but I also have access to the cluster and I have access to the build states and the maybe security signing of this application. I think it's a really neat concept to have it all in one spot.
Exactly. You're not overwhelming someone immediately, but they can go deeper under the covers if they need to. I think that's kind of like what's nice here. You're not immediately telling them to log into the OpenShift console and look at build runs or pipelines or tons of YAML. They can come in here first and get a kind of more gentle introduction and find the high level info. But they can go deeper, like you said. I think that's nice. Mm-hmm. But yeah, so like I said, models are discovered. Their metadata is here in Developer Hub. And if we head over to the Developer Hub catalog, it has all different kinds of metadata about services running in your organization. So on this screen, you can see on the kind dropdown on the left that's highlighted, we're looking at components. And that's kind of a generic term, I suppose you could say. But basically, components are things like microservices or applications running in your environment. So you see we have a bunch here, and the names are all kind of banking related. So this kind of example is aligned with a banking industry example. Now, if we click on the dropdown, we can change the kind to resource. And resources are typically things like an S3 bucket or a database or a Kafka broker. So developers can find out what infra type resources are available to them within your organization. In the case of this demo, we're just filtering and showing the models, the AI models. So you can see there's a type dropdown in the column here, and it's AI model. Now, of course, that could be queue or bucket or database, for example, as well. So you can filter these. If we click on the model, we see some more information about that model and its relationship with an owner, for example. You can see Gabe, our teammate, was working on this model, and he was the one who actually deployed it. So it's owned by him. So we can see the owner. And in the case of a model, maybe that doesn't seem super compelling. But in the case of, say, an API or a microservice that's running in your organization, it's good to know that usually it's a team, not an individual, but we can have teams who own those. And if you're building an application that needs to integrate with it, it's very easy to find out, hey, who owns that service, and go talk to them. So it's really nice to have this information in here. Additionally, we get documentation rendered just like we saw in AI, OpenShift AI. It's rendered here in DevHub. So developers, for example, you can see a curl command here that can show them how to interact with the model as well. There's also example Python code as well.
That's very cool. That's a new feature to me, because I mean, we have a lot of teams that are Java based, and then we have a bunch of teams that are doing POCs in Python, and they both need to access that model. So I didn't know you could add all this to the documentation side too. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's super nice. So you can give some nice examples just to get people like kickstarted or started out of the box, right? Where they can learn how to use it regardless of their language, like LangChain for J or LangChain in Python, or just raw HTTP maybe if they want to go that route.
Right.
Yeah. So in the component then screen, we're back here. We can use the type dropdown to filter again, and we have a model server type, right? So you can actually see the model server, and what this means is, not only is that resource available, like the model resource itself, like we saw the container image, but it's actually deployed and an inference server is running. So that's what this means. This model now is actually after being deployed, and you can see the owner is Gabe. So Gabe was kind enough to deploy this model in our organization. And if I click on it, I can go to the dependencies tab again, and I can see the owner and the relationship with the underlying resource. So the owner is Gabe again. The component is Granite 8B, and the component depends on the image resource. So we can see that full graph. Now, in this case, it's quite simple because it's not talking to a bunch of services yet. But as more people consume this model, that graph will build out, and you'll know who's using it. So yeah, if we click on the API node. Yeah, sorry, go ahead, Cedric.
I was just saying that's awesome. Because you had the artifact, and then you have the actual server running it, right? You kind of think of like Apache running your HTML files or something like that. And I think the same is true for models if you're trying to run them yourself. You've got the artifact that you need to separate from the actual running instance. And so then you kind of have this beautiful tree of all these resources that are using a model. And then maybe you can figure out, hey, why is it running slowly? Probably because it's hitting 100 endpoints are hitting it or something like that.
Exactly. Like there's a ton of people depending on this. And now we need to scale it up to more replicas or something, right? Like using OpenShift AI, where you can actually configure that or throw more resources at it. And what's crazy is this one is really simple, actually, but I have a new demo where I have a huge graph, right? So there's an overall system, like a root node, and there's a ton of dependencies like Kafka brokers and other things, and then services talking to the Kafka broker, which talk to the models. And you actually have to zoom in because there's too many nodes in the graph. So you can't, if you look at the default view, it's too small. So yeah, this thing can get pretty crazy.
Christmas tree.
Quickly. Yeah, pretty much. It's like a giant Christmas tree, except it's all blue. I think we need different colors for like the different nodes. It's too blue. I don't know. Quick question: are you a white tree light, or are you a different color tree light guy?
Whatever's cheapest on Amazon.
Very Gen Z. Very Gen Z.
Yeah. What are you?
I'm more of a classic twinkly light guy, but with the white color, like the warm, not white, but warm, like glow, but not multicolored. Yeah.
Yeah. I think 4,000 Kelvin is the way to say it. I don't know what I'm thinking of, but I know
the lower Kelvin is like warmer, I know. So yeah, the lower Kelvin value, the better.
Right. We're nerding out for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I have a bunch of photography gear in the corner here, so it's my jam. But yeah, so getting back to the demo, the API we're looking at here has a definition. So this is also automatically imported into that DevHub. And you can, again, use this to explore the API inference for the inference server to talk to the model, right? So we can see the different endpoints. And in particular, probably completions is a common one being used. I don't think I scroll down and see it, but you can actually interact with the model and learn how to interact with it using this API definition. And it's just standard Open API spec, and it's synced again into DevHub. So this is really useful for developers experimenting with the model. Also, just a side note, developers can star entities. So if you click that star button and then you click it up in the top right, you'll be able to see your favorites in DevHub.
It's cool.
And then just one last thing before we dive into an actual application example, you can customize DevHub and add custom screens to it. So here we have a custom AI news screen that pulls in AI news articles. You can use this to pull in internal information within your organization as well. So not just AI news, but updates at an organizational level as well, if you wanted to. So now we're going to actually use this model in production, or maybe dev first, but start building a new application that actually uses it. And how we're going to do this is using a DevHub template. So DevHub, as you can see here, has AI templates built in that we've loaded. As a platform engineer, we would load these in so you can curate what templates you want available to developers, and you can customize them. And I'll talk more about the customization as we actually step through the template to kind of make it easier to understand visually. So this one is pretty simple. It's just a chatbot application, the generic LLM use case. We have some more advanced examples now, like RAG, a chatbot that can RAG over a terms of service or a policy, or even structured message routing as well. But let's go with the chatbot one because it's simple and easy to understand. So when you click a template, you basically get a form you can fill out, and a developer would typically fill this form out to start building a new application. So in this case, we're going to build a new application, and we've named it My Chatbot, as you can see in the first field. But in this particular template, we can actually choose to provide a model server to the template. So we can click on this model server dropdown, and we can choose an existing model server. And what you see is, as soon as that's chosen, we have the template defaulting to the Granite 8B model that's deployed. So that component, you can see the structure here, the component is Granite 8B. And it just defaulted to that one because that's the only one that's deployed. If you recall, in the catalog, we saw one component that was deployed of type model server, and it was the Granite 318B model. Now, if we had more models deployed, we could maybe choose between those if a developer had access to them. And that's going off on a whole tangent, but you can actually use RBAC in Developer Hub to limit access to certain types of resources. So yeah, I'll go ahead. Yeah, it's pretty neat. Like, it has its whole RBAC system, but that's a bit beyond today, I think.
The flow I see here is kind of like, because I've worked at organizations where I need some resource spun up or some service spun up, and I make a Jira ticket, and then someone hopefully looks at it. But this is cool because it's like you're doing it yourself. You are entitled to certain privileges and certain resources, and there's like a certain level of trust for the developer to be able to spin this up and annotate it and relate it to other resources and have everyone be able to see that. So I think that's what's really cool here is like this template is kind of just like, it's giving power to the developer to
it's
instead of just placing it all on one team, and that one team is like, oh, you got to make sure that team's happy with you so that they'll give you priority and let you spin things up.
It allows you to avoid that kind of ticket hell that you can get into, ticket purgatory. And like, you can control this, right? So it's not a free for all, right? You can control this and lock it down in certain ways. I have templates, for example, that they allow you to create the application, and it goes in a Git repo, of course. But to actually deploy it, you have to do another template, and that one actually opens a pull request to like a app of apps. If you're familiar with Argo CD, they have this concept of app of apps. You can open a PR to another repo that says, hey, merge in this piece of YAML to kickstart a deployment of this application. So you can't just start deploying it. Someone has to look and say, okay, we will deploy this, but you can start working on an application at least. So that's, you can structure this in creative ways to minimize ticket ops on developers. So yeah, I think you're right. It's a lot more, it gives you some freedom and some flexibility, and it doesn't get you bogged down in ticket hell, or it allows you to avoid that.
Right.
Yeah, so this is a multi-stage template. So it has a couple of sections. The second section here is where you define the repository information for the new application. So you can basically decide where it gets stored. Typically, I imagine most organizations will have this as a very basic step, right? They won't even give you the option to choose the host, perhaps. Maybe they've all standardized on Azure DevOps or GitLab or GitHub Enterprise. In this case, we're using GitHub. So we'll just go with the defaults. And you can see the repository name, it defaults to the same name as the application, which was My Chatbot. And then for the deployment, this kind of refers to the image registry in this template, which defaults to Quay.io. And the organization, again, in a large organization, you may not have these as free text fields. They may be pre-populated and defaulted, or you have a drop-down of a specific set of organizations that you're using. So that's that. And then once we're happy with our inputs, we can review them and click on create. And when you click create, it runs a multi-step process to actually set up everything for a developer to start working on this application. Now, normally you'll see like a loading spinner for 2-3 seconds on some of these. But basically what it does is it pulls the template, it injects your variables that you put in on this form into the template, which would be, a code base, and then pushes it to GitHub or GitLab, for example. It does the same again, but for deployment resources. So in this case, we're using a Kubernetes cluster, OpenShift, under the hood. So it generates a bunch of YAML for the developer, or uses a Helm chart to render some YAML. And then it registers that deployment manifest with Argo CD. So you can see here on the right, we have Argo. We're registering those resources with Argo. Then we trigger the pipeline for the first ever build. And with that out of the way, the application has now been kickstarted. And we can click View Component and Catalog. So this is a new application. And we get an overview of the new app, right? So this can be as complicated as you like. This is a more straightforward one. But what we can see is a deployment summary on the right, linked to the documentation that was auto-generated and source code on the left. And we can also drill down into the CI pipelines, continuous delivery, and the topology view on OpenShift. So if we click on the topology view, we can actually see our application and what it would look like running in OpenShift without having to jump over to OpenShift. So the developer can even click here on a pod, so the running version of their application, which has now been built. And if they click on those logs, you can see logs directly from your pod. So again, you don't have to jump over to OpenShift to start inspecting things. You can just do it right here from DevHub, because it's integrated with OpenShift as well as OpenShift AI. And we can even click on Open URL in the case of this application, because it has a public endpoint that we can access. So if we click on that, you can see it's a very basic chatbot. And we can, type to interact with the model. So in this case, we asked, hey, tell me about the Quarkus framework for Java. And it gave us a pretty accurate response, right? It's telling us Quarkus is a Kubernetes native Java stack for microservices and cloud native applications. So that was all it took for a developer to deploy generative AI enabled application. A platform engineer set up, DevHub. They set up the integration with OpenShift AI. But what that enabled was a developer to very quickly consume a template and start building using these models. And I think that's pretty much the demo in a nutshell. So if we have questions in chat, Cedric, or you want to talk more about the demo, I'm happy to.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really cool. Right before you open up the application is like all of those steps that were kind of getting greenlit, right, as you created the template, I think is really cool, because those are typically each kind of steps that you have to go through manually or procedurally to get something out there, even in development, right? So to go from my laptop to the cluster that our organization uses, we need the ops and the GitOps to have that application ready to be deployed. And then we also have to build that image, and then we also have to sign it maybe. And so all of those steps are kind of just being kind of ran together. But the developer doesn't have to worry about that. And I think that's what's really cool. The developer just says, hey, I want this application using this model deployed to this repository, and bam, everything else works out. So they don't have to be stuck in the, oh shoot, did I do this correctly?
Exactly. I think that's a big thing too. I didn't dive into that, but we do have supply chain security constructs built into the pipeline, but the developer didn't have to think about it, right? They were just like, hey, I've been told I need to build out a new application that talks to a model endpoint, and it does some non-deterministic or undeterministic fuzzy logic or something, for example. They can do that real easily by using one of these templates. And they don't have to scaffold those namespaces. They don't have to deal with YAML, or they don't have to build a Helm chart or know which Helm chart to use. They don't have to generate SBOMs. All of this is just done for them. And if you talk to a lot of developers, they don't want to deal with that, because their job is not to do infrastructure. Their job is hey, we need these new features in production tomorrow, or whatever.
Yesterday.
And this makes that a bit easier to achieve. Yeah, yesterday, depending on who you ask. And this makes it easier to achieve that outcome, right, for a developer, because they have the API docs for the model, they have the template code base that scaffolds everything for them, which allow them to work on those features rather than getting blocked by infra concerns or even organizational roadblocks. But we do kind of talk about this sometimes as being a mindset shift as well, to giving your teams more freedom and also investing in building your application platform, right?
Absolutely. And I don't know where Evan went, but this reminds me of a time where there's two ways that I've developed in my life. Hey, welcome back, Evan.
Not sure what happened.
No, I don't know. I was saying there's two truths to how I've developed in my life. The first being, code locally on my machine and then upload via FTP to a server and then view those changes online. And there was a point in time in my life when that's how I developed. And then now you see of all these procedures and requirements that we need just to deploy a simple chatbot application, right? So there's two ways that I feel like in our lifetimes we've developed. Of course, the latter is definitely the best way to do it in terms of, is something going to break? Am I conflicting with something? Am I going to have breaking changes? And so I think, to have that all automated and the developer not have to worry about all of those setups and dependencies using Developer Hub and then having OpenShift AI underneath to do the versioning of the models, I think it just makes it a lot easier.
Exactly.
For the devs, for us, which is nice.
Yeah.
Well,
for sure. I didn't think you were old enough to remember FTP, by the way.
Yeah, hey, I've seen a lot in my lifetime. But Evan, if we want to get set up with Developer Hub, is there a way to try it out? Is there a way to get a demo experience, just to test things out?
Yeah, and for OpenShift AI too. So if, I don't know, can I put a link in chat maybe or something? But if you go to developers.redhat.com, you can find, we have OpenShift Sandbox, which it basically entitles you to try these products for free. And by products, what I mean is OpenShift itself. So you get access to an OpenShift environment. You also get access to OpenShift AI, which is available in there too, I believe. And with access to that OpenShift cluster, we have a bunch of guides, again, on on developers.redhat.com. You can go to the Developer Hub pages over there, and we have some quick starts to pretty much deploy Developer Hub on OpenShift. And you can, knock yourself out. You can configure all this and try it. I have a lot of blogs that kind of cover this too, showing you how to set up the GitHub identity provider to log in. And the team, the engineering team, and other DevRels and TMMs have also built out content around integrating OpenShift AI with DevHub. So yeah, there's a ton of stuff over there. So people can kick the tires and try it themselves.
Yeah, sweet. Well, hey, Rohan, if you could switch my screen over, I think I pulled this the screen that you're talking about up. If developers want to try out the Developer Hub and OpenShift AI and all the stuff that we showed today, it's like 30 days where you just click a button and you get access to a cluster, 7 gigs of RAM, 15 gigabytes of storage. Don't do too much Bitcoin mining on there. So you can test that out and then go through some of the blogs and learning paths that Evan and his team have been working on. They're really cool. Show you real world scenarios, especially with bringing these AI models to production and all of the other requirements that you need for that. But on this note, I'll change real quick right back to the Interact page. So if you scan that QR code, you can go through some of these that show you OpenShift Lightspeed, the inference server, migrating VMs, and of course, for the Developer Hub as well. So you can learn about how it works in more detail and see some other features. But on this note, Evan, is there anything else that you'd like to share with the audience? I really appreciate you joining us, man.
No, it's good to join you guys. Always good to catch up. I know we're never in the same time zones anymore, so it's good to talk. And yeah, I just shout out, there's a few more arcades over there for DevHub too. I've worked on them, and so have some of the team. So yeah, in this area, you'll find things like faster deployment for applications, AI deployment. We show how you can actually integrate OpenShift Lightspeed with Developer Hub, so you actually have your corporate approved ChatGPT instance or whatever model you're using baked into DevHub, and it can even use MCP to provide knowledge or answers based on real data contained in DevHub too. So we have more demos like that too over here in the interactive portal.
Awesome. Well, thank you for working hard on them and for showing us today your demo around, bringing those AI models and applications into, a dev or production environment using these open source projects like VLLM, Llama C++, and Backstage by Spotify. So to conclude, make sure you scan that code and catch us here again in 2 weeks as we cover another open source technology. Of course, doing a deep dive, showing you how it works in the tech side of things. And until then, we will catch you. Have a great rest of your weekend. Evan, thank you so much for joining us and getting up pretty early here on the West Coast. So we appreciate it. Rohan is behind the scenes, so big thanks to him. And catch you next time on the Red Hat channel. Have a great day.